They slammed me to the ground, twisted my arms, and cuffed me like a criminal while I was in full U.S. Army uniform. They did not care who I was. They did not even ask. To them, I was just another black body to control. But what they did not know was that I was the one assigned to investigate them, and my one phone call would end their careers. On that day, they shoved me to the pavement, face first, as if I were some criminal caught red-handed, not a decorated U.S. Army sergeant. The asphalt burned into my skin. Gravel sliced through my palms as they twisted my arms behind my back. The steel of the handcuffs dug into my wrists with brutal indifference. A crowd had started to gather in the midday sun, recording on their phones. Voices rising. She is in uniform. Someone screamed, but the two officers did not flinch. Officer Perry, a stocky white man with a bald head that gleamed with sweat, kept his knee pressed hard against my back. His partner, Officer Jenna Young, blonde, smug, leaned down, sneering like I was filth she could not wait to toss into the back of their squad car. "This'll teach you not to impersonate a soldier," Jenna muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, her breath reeking of coffee and cheap authority. I could not breathe, not from the weight on my spine, but from the sheer disbelief. I was still wearing my Army service uniform. The nameplate on my chest said James. The patch on my sleeve bore the insignia of the Southern Command. The ribbons, the medals earned from deployments, I do not even speak of in polite conversation, clinked as my body was jerked upward. My cap had rolled under a nearby car. And yet, to them, I was not a soldier. I was just a threat, because I was black, because I was standing in a parking lot in South Carolina, because I was helping an old homeless man who had fallen trying to reach the sidewalk. He was not even conscious anymore. And that is what made me snap. I am Sergeant Helena James, 38, born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina, 16 years in the U.S., Army, Bronze Star recipient, twice deployed to Afghanistan. I have led search and rescue missions in storm-torn Louisiana. I have helped rebuild war-torn neighborhoods overseas. But none of that mattered here in front of this dollar mart to Officer Perry and Officer Jenna. To them, I was a problem that needed to be subdued. A uniform was not enough to shield me from their racism. My skin erased every medal I had earned. My day had started like any other. I was on leave, just a short one. I planned to buy supplies for a local shelter, check in on my grandmother, maybe enjoy some hush puppies and sweet tea on the porch, when I saw Darnell, a kind old man who'd been living on the streets since his wife died, trip and fall near the parking lot entrance. I rushed to help him. He was bleeding from his elbow and barely coherent. That is when someone called the cops. Suspicious individual in combat uniform, helping a man who appears to be overdosing. They never even asked for my name. Instead, sirens blared, and then came the yelling. Guns drawn. Commands barked. Hands where I can see them. I said, "Drop the bag." They moved fast, too fast not to kill, but to dominate. The kind of quick aggression born from years of knowing no one ever questions them. They did not see me as a soldier. They saw a threat they were eager to neutralize. My ID card had fallen out, still visible in the open side pouch of my duffel. They did not even look. You have the right to remain silent. Perry spat as he clicked the cuffs. I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm. That is the part that hurt the most. I stayed calm. Trained. Disciplined. Conditioned. The same training they claimed to respect. But discipline did not save me from humiliation. They shoved me into the back seat of their squad car as Darnell lay forgotten on the sidewalk. One woman from the crowd rushed to him, while another kept recording, her voice trembling. They are arresting a soldier. In uniform. What is wrong with this country? Inside the vehicle. My knees pressed against the cage in front of me. My back ached. My eyes were burning. Probably bought that outfit online. Jenna chuckled from the front seat. Or maybe she stole it from her boyfriend. Perry laughed. That is the problem with these people. Always trying to act above their station. These people, those words rang like bullets in my ears. I had heard them before, in boot camp, whispered behind my back, in briefing rooms, when a superior questioned if I really earned my marks, but never so boldly, never while in uniform, never with my hands cuffed behind me like a criminal. They parked in the station garage, away from the public. I sat in the back seat for nearly 15 minutes as they processed me, meaning they debated who would get credit for the arrest. That is when I spoke. Am I allowed one phone call? Jenna glanced back. Amused. Sure. Why not? Wanna call your sergeant boyfriend, or better yet, your lawyer? I did not answer. I just memorized the digits they punched into the keypad for me. Then, I leaned into the receiver. This is Sergeant Helena James, Idaho 072218. Activate Protocol Lima 1. Immediate escalation. There was a pause on the other end, then a calm, deliberate voice responded. Understood. Stay seated. Help is en route. I hung up. Jenna stared at me. Puzzled. Lima, what now? But Perry had already gone pale. He turned toward her. Did she say? Helena James. And in that moment, the first domino fell. They had no idea who they would just arrested. No idea what that call had triggered. But they were about to learn. Because I was not just a soldier. I was the one assigned to monitor them. And now, I was not just wearing the uniform. I was using its full power. And they had just made the gravest mistake of their careers. I did not grow up dreaming of medals. My childhood was not painted in red, white, and blue. It was shaded in hand-me-downs. Eviction notices, and the dull ache of hearing my mother cry herself to sleep. I was raised in Columbia, South Carolina, by a woman who worked 2 jobs and still could not afford a heater in the winter. My neighborhood was made of broken sidewalks and broken promises. I remember watching my brother being frisked by police for walking home with a backpack. He was 12. Back then, I thought justice were a badge. That was before I knew better. I am 38 now. My name is Helena James. Wes. Army Sergeant. Black. Woman. Combat tested. Trauma trained. And for some reason, that still is not enough to protect me in my own country. People say the military breaks you down to build you back up. What they do not tell you is that if you are black, female, or other. You come in broken. You arrive already buried under years of disrespect, underestimated by teachers, overlooked for scholarships, over-policed, over-explained, overexposed to everything except mercy. And when you survive all of that, when you finally make it boot camp, the desert, blood, sand, dust, commands shouted in languages you can't pronounce. They call you madam. They salute you. They write articles about your bravery. But the moment you take that uniform off, or even when you wear it in the wrong zip code, they forget. Or worse, they choose not to see it. The day those officers slammed me onto the concrete, I was not supposed to be there. I was on a 3-day leave from Fort Bragg. The truth, I needed a break not from the Army, but from the weight of pretending I was okay. That is something soldiers do not talk about. The after, the in-between, the moment the battlefield ends, and the battle inside begins. I would been running on empty. Nightmares came like second shifts. Loud noises made me flinch. But I was not weak. I was just tired of being strong in silence. That morning, I had decided to do something simple. Help someone. I drove past Dollar Mart and saw a mare, Darnell, lying halfway on the curb, his elbow bent wrong, blood soaking his shirt. I parked and sprinted. He looked up at me, half lucid. James. That you? I would known him since I was a kid. He used to mow lawns and sing gospel tunes off key. He did not deserve to die like this alone, unnoticed. So I did what I always do. Serve. I called emergency services and used my field training to stabilize him, tearing open a package of gauze from my first aid kit. He was coming around slowly, whispering about his wife. I was focused, calm, efficient. I did not notice the woman across the parking lot, staring at me through her tinted SUV window, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She did not see a soldier. She saw danger. A black woman in camouflage, cradling an injured man. To her, that was enough to call the police. Possible overdose. Military gear. Not sure if she is really Army. She must be said. And minutes later, I was on the ground, in handcuffs. But this chapter is not just about them. It is about who I am, the full story. At 19, I joined the Army not out of patriotism, but escape. College was out of reach. My mom's health was failing, and I needed to send money home. I scored high in training. They told me I had leadership potential. I did not even know what that meant. By 23, I was stationed in Kabul. I would never held a baby before, but I delivered one in a tent during a blackout. I would never seen someone die up close, until I carried a young private with a chest wound and felt the moment his breath stopped. But I did not break. I adapted. I led. I climbed the ranks. By 32, I was the only woman in my unit given clearance for Operation Broken Horizon, a Black Ops rescue that never made the news, but saved 6 American hostages. My name is buried in the documents, but the families know. They send letters every Veterans Day. Yet here I was, treated like a suspect, as if none of it mattered. That is the story of so many of us. Serve the country, then get surveilled by it. What Perry and Jenna did not know, could not know, was that I had recently been assigned a top-secret task force under the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. I was gathering evidence of civil rights abuses within local law enforcement agencies. A nationwide sweep. I had full federal authority. Quiet authority. Until now. That phone call from the squad car. It did not just send help. It set off a chain reaction. My commanding officer, General Scott, would have already activated the liaison protocol. My arrest triggered an automatic lock on the precinct's records. Their body cams, their radio logs, their personnel files. The irony. They were already on my list. I was gathering information on racial profiling in the precinct Perry belonged to. He did not just arrest a soldier, he arrested his own auditor. And now it was too late to undo. Back at the precinct, they put me in a holding cell. Jenna still smirked as she tossed me in. Perry was quieter now, beads of sweat gathering at his temple. His fingers trembled as he typed something into his computer. It was starting to dawn on him. The way the front desk officer snapped to attention when he saw my ed. The way the phone kept ringing in the supervisor's office. The way no one was laughing anymore. I sat still on the bench. Spine straight. Eyes forward. Years of training in my posture. The door opened, and for the first time, the room changed. Two men in black suits entered, Dodge insignia on their lapels. One carried a folder. The other, a tablet. They did not look at Perry. They looked at me, and they nodded. Sergeant James, one of them said, voice low but clear. We are here. You may speak freely now. I stood slowly. The walls of that police department were about to shake. They did not just arrest me. They unleashed me. Perry tried to speak first. I did not know. But Agent Ross raised a single hand, calm and cutting like a scalpel. You will remain silent unless spoken to. The entire precinct stilled. The sound of the HVAC unit humming overhead suddenly felt deafening. Jenna leaned against the hallway wall, arms crossed but visibly shaken. Her smirk from earlier, gone. Perry's lips pressed into a pale, flat line. His shoulders hunched now not in confidence, but in dread. The two agents who walked in, Agent Ross and Agent Nguyen, were not the type to entertain confusion. Ross, mid-50s, white, sharp suit, eyes that could dissect you in silence. Nguyen, early 40s, Vietnamese American, sleek tablet in hand. Expression, unreadable. They moved with the grace of men who did not need to prove anything. They had already seen the report, already pulled the wiretaps, already knew more than Perry ever would. Sergeant Helena James. Ross nodded again, this time as acknowledgement, not greeting. We have initiated Level 3 compliance review under Directive Lima 1. The team will arrive in 45 minutes. Until then, you are to remain here. No contact. No calls. No editing records. The server is already mirrored. Nguyen was scanning through digital files, his face lit faintly by the blue glow of the tablet. Jesus Christ, he murmured. Barely audible. They have been flagging over 400 black civilians for surveillance priority. in this district alone. I did not flinch. I had already suspected as much. This was why I had taken the assignment. 6 months earlier, I sat in a dim conference room in Dock C, across from General Mavis. She told me, "Helena, what is happening is not policing, is predation, and we need someone they want to see coming. Someone they will underestimate." And they did. They saw a black woman in a uniform and assumed I was less. They did not know I had the power to end them. I looked over to Perry. "You do not remember me, do you?" His eyes twitched. 2008, I said softly. "You pulled my brother, Eric James, over for a broken taillight. He was 16. You made him lie face down in the dirt. You threatened to shoot him if he moved. He cried all night. My mother never recovered from that night. His mouth opened-closed. Nothing came out. I stepped forward. I was in boot camp then, but I never forgot your name. And neither did the system. You have left a trail longer than a highway. And now, for once, the road leads back to you." Guyan swiped on his tablet, then looked up. "You have got complaints buried under layers of misconduct codes," he said to Perry. "Unjustified stops. Disproportionate force. Racial bias patterns confirmed by a audit. And Jenna." He turned. "You are not far behind. 5 misconduct cover-ups, 3 falsified testimonies, 1 sealed juvenile assault complaint we are about to unseal." Jenna's face cracked like ice beneath a boot. I did not. Those were protocol." She stammered. "Your protocol is a crime scene," I said coldly. Agent Ross nodded. "Both of you are being relieved of duty. Effective immediately. Your badges, weapons, and access cards. Now." Jenna's hands shook as she removed her belt. Perry stared at the wall, jaw tight, before finally unhooking his badge and dropping it on the table with a metallic clink. No one reached for it. I watched them fall apart with the same silence they used to humiliate others. But this was not about revenge. It was about reckoning. Outside, I could see news vans pulling up. The clip of my arrest had gone viral. "Black soldier arrested in uniform" was trending nationwide. The crowd that once watched from the sidewalk had grown into a protest circle. Signs were going up. Chants had begun. People were angry. But more than that, they were awake. A local black pastor I recognized, Reverend Hale, was speaking to a reporter with fire in his voice. "We are not surprised," he said. "We are just finally being heard." Inside, Nguyen handed me a sealed folder. "Your orders," he said. "Effective immediately. You are the acting liaison commander for Internal Affairs Division, Southern Circuit. Your jurisdiction includes this entire county." "You mean I run this precinct now?" I asked flatly. Ross cracked the faintest smile. "Until it is rebuilt properly. Yes." The words settled in the air like thunder before a storm. Helena James, the soldier they thought was a suspect, now had the authority to audit every officer in this building, to suspend, to interrogate, to refer for prosecution. They did not just lose their power. They handed it to me. As they were escorted out, I turned to Nguyen. "How many precincts left on the sweep list?" 17. He said, "But this is the first to fall on camera." I nodded. "Then let us make sure it is not the last." Behind me, a junior officer approached. His nameplate read Morales. Latino. Mid-20s. Nervous. "Madam," he said, We have been waiting for someone like you." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw hope, not just in him, in all of us. Because today was not about punishment. It was about rebuilding, but not before the truth had its day. And that day had just begun. The backlash did not take long. By the time I stepped into what used to be Perry's office, now a stripped-down shell, with a cracked monitor and coffee-stained desk, my inbox had already flooded. News networks were calling. Civil rights attorneys were circling like hawks. But what caught my eye was the subject line blinking at the top. Request for immediate internal review, suspension, Office of State. Oversight. I opened it. Read once. Then again. And then. I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. They were already trying to shut me down. The letter was wrapped in official language, but the message was clear. Stand down. Stop digging. Walk away. It came from Deputy Commissioner Alan Mears, a man who had not returned any of my audit requests for the past 2 years. Now, suddenly, he cared. But I knew what this was. This was not just about Perry and Jenna. This was about a system rusted from the inside out that had grown so used to swallowing evidence and spitting out silence. It could not fathom someone like me refusing to disappear. I closed the email, took a breath, and then I opened another folder. Case file. District 9B suppressed complaints. Names spilled across the screen. Faces I remembered. Faces that never got justice. Leroy Adams pulled from his car. Teeth knocked out. Case dismissed for non-cooperation. Amani Wells assaulted in a holding cell. Her rape kit lost in transit. Devon Clark, 17, tasered while handcuffed. Later suspended from school for disruptive behavior. No officer disciplined. Each file a wound. Each wound a story. And I would not let them be erased. That afternoon, I called for a precinct-wide stand-down. Every officer, badge or not, was ordered to submit a personal conduct report by end of day. Some resisted. Most obeyed, but a few went dark. One of them was Lieutenant Reddick Tall. Quiet, always in the background, no prior complaints, no major praise. Just silence. But silence, I had learned, was its own kind of weapon. Reddick did not file his report. He did not show up for shift either. At first, I thought he was avoiding the paperwork, but by 6 p.m., a tip came in anonymous, untraceable, that led us to the evidence locker. What we found stopped everyone cold. Behind a false wall panel, hidden in a black duffel bag marked training supplies, were over a dozen confiscated phones. Burned out. Batteries removed. But they were not logged. They were not tagged. These were not standard evidence items. They were silencers, devices taken from victims who tried to film abuse, witnesses whose testimonies vanished the moment they handed over their phones for safekeeping. Guyan stared at the pile and muttered, "This goes deeper than misconduct." He was right. This was not rogue behavior. This was ritual. This precinct, this whole district, had built itself on quiet, on compliance, on erasure. And now, every whisper was echoing back. At 7:32 p.m., the power went out, a city-wide blackout. They said, but we knew. Within seconds, the emergency generator kicked in. My laptop rebooted. The camera systems, the ones we would installed that afternoon, blinked, glitched, and then went live again. But something had changed. When the lights returned, a line of protesters had grown outside the station. Word had spread. The clip of my arrest had now crossed 12 million views. But more than that, it had become a symbol, not just of me, but of everyone they would silenced. I walked outside, in full uniform. I stood on the steps and faced the crowd, a mix of faces. Black, white, brown, young, old. Some wore shirts with my name. Some held candles. One child held a handmade sign. She served her country. Who serves her? That sign pierced me more than any headline ever could. Behind me, Morales whispered, "You sure about this?" I nodded. I took the bullhorn, clicked it on, and spoke. "I am Sergeant Helena James. I was arrested for wearing my uniform while black. I was arrested for helping someone. I was arrested because they did not see a soldier. They saw a threat." The crowd held its breath. But I am not here for revenge. I am here for reckoning. This building behind me is not just brick and glass. It is memory. It is failure. It is the site of 100 silent screams. But no more. They began to cheer, loud, rising, uncontainable. I raised my hand to quiet them. I was sent here undercover to audit injustice. But today, I step into the open, because the truth does not hide, and neither will I. Behind me, a window on the 3rd floor slammed shut. I saw a figure dart away. Someone was still trying to run. But they could not hide now. Because I had the badge, I had the files, I had the people, and I had something they never expected me to have. A voice no longer afraid of the silence. The silence was not gone. It had just changed. No longer a silence of suppression. This was a silence before a storm. By the next morning, an entire wing of the precinct was cordoned off. I had ordered a full forensic audit of the digital evidence servers. Agent Nguyen had flown in 2 cybersecurity specialists overnight, both former ENSA. One of them, a soft-spoken black woman named Danielle, tapped her screen and frowned. "There are timestamps missing," she said, "files that were logged, then wiped, but not gone." Her fingers moved like a pianist over the keyboard. "These are not just deleted videos. These are incident reports. Citizen complaints, gone just days after being filed. Someone tried to bury bodies in digital sand. I did not have to ask who. Lieutenant Reddick was still missing. So were his bodycam files. The deeper we dug, the more the stink rose. This was not 2 bad cops. This was a network. Coordinated. Protected. Funded. Somewhere inside this station, or above it, someone had the power to delete lives with a few keystrokes. And now, they were trying to erase me too. At 10. 3 a.m. I got the call. Private line. Unknown number. Male voice. Southern accent. Slippery. Calm. Sergeant James. He said, "You have made quite the name for yourself." "Identify yourself," I said. "That is not important." He replied, "But what is important is that you stop digging. You have made your point. The officers who hurt you are gone. There is no need to drag more people down, especially not good ones." He paused. "We all have skeletons, do not we?" The threat was subtle, but I would dance this waltz before, in war zones, in tribunals, in rooms where men underestimated me behind their polished desks. "Keep your skeletons," I said. "I am dragging bodies into the light." I hung up. But inside, my blood had chilled, because I recognized that tone. It was not fear, it was control. This was not a cover-up anymore. This was war. By noon, the mayor's office issued a public statement calling my actions concerning and my appointment provisional. Suddenly, news outlets began re-examining my career, digging through deployments, questioning why a soldier was embedded with police in the first place. It was coordinated. Smear tactics. But I did not flinch, because I knew something they did not. I had evidence. Guyan walked into the war room holding a used drive. We decrypted the locker. He said, "There is more than phones. There is video." He plugged it in. What played on the screen made everyone freeze. A small, dimly lit interrogation room. A teenage boy. Black. Maybe 15. Crying. Hands cuffed to the table. Perry standing over him. Jenna in the corner. Arms folded. "You tell them what we told you." Perry barked. But I did not. The boy whimpered. Slap. Hard. Loud. The boy's head jerked. "Say it again, and I swear I will put you in the hospital." Jenna laughed. That boy's name was Marcus Tilden. 3 years ago, he was charged with assaulting an officer. But he never touched anyone. His charges stuck. He spent 6 months in juvie, dropped out of school. No future. No apology. Until now. I played the tape again, burned every frame into my memory. Then I called his mother, as Tilden. I said, "I have something you need to see." She came in wearing her Sunday best, like she was coming to church. Not war. She watched the video in silence. Not a tear, not a tremble. When it ended, she said, "I knew. I just did not have the proof. Now." She did. And we would give it a microphone. We arranged a press conference, not just to clear Marcus's name, but to ignite the fire we needed. That night, standing behind a podium flanked by flags and protesters, I gave the world the truth. This is not just about me. I said, it is about every voice they silenced, every hand they twisted, every young black boy who walks with his shoulders hunched because he knows they are watching him. I pointed to the screen behind me, where the video played. You call this policing. I call it abuse. And I will burn it to the ground if I have to. The crowd roared. But it was not just noise. It was resolve. The next morning, Lieutenant Reddick turned himself in. He walked into the precinct. Shoulders square. Eyes bloodshot. He looked me dead in the face and said, "I have files. They told me to erase them. I kept them. For when the world changed." I nodded. "Is changing now." He handed over a sealed envelope. Inside were flash drives. Passwords. Names. Dozens. Maybe more. "We are going to need more chairs," I said to Morriles. He chuckled. "And more prisons." But I was not interested in vengeance. I wanted transformation. They had built a fortress on lies, but brick by brick, voice by voice, we were tearing it down. And for the first time in my life, I believed something I never let myself say out loud. Justice does not always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it walks in wearing boots and a uniform. And sometimes it is a black woman who refuses to be quiet. The moment I touched their power, they tried to rewrite my name. It started with whispers online forums, anonymous calls to my old commander, clickbait headlines designed to sow doubt. Was Helena James ever actually deployed? Military hero or manufactured image? Is this the face of a woke inquisition? One article dug up an incident in Kandahar, a mission that left 2 of my team wounded and 1. Private Lewis, Kaya. They spun the tragedy into accusation. Her orders got him killed. They said she panicked under pressure. They claimed. They never mentioned the ambush, never cited the commendation I received for dragging my men to cover under fire, never printed the handwritten letter from Lua's mother thanking me for bringing her son home in a flag-wrapped casket with honor. But I knew the game. Discredit. Disorient. Distract. I had trained for this. What they did not realize was that my silence in the past was not weakness, it was calculation. You do not climb through a system built to erase women, like me, by crying every time they try to stain your uniform. You learn when to shout and when to strike. And now I was striking. The flash drives Reddick handed over contained more than evidence. They were the blueprint of an entire web of corruption, officer misconduct logs, redacted arrest files, payoffs, even bank transfers from an off-budget community trust that funneled money straight into a PAC headed by none other than Deputy Commissioner Alan Mears, the same man who tried to shut me down 2 days ago. The same man who signed off on special training bonuses for precincts reported the highest arrest numbers, regardless of actual conviction rates. They were paid to incarcerate, paid to profile, paid to perform brutality. Under the banner of results, Agent Ross and Agent Nguyen worked side by side with DA analysts. We formed a rapid task force to review the evidence. Within 48 hours, we had enough to file a motion to freeze Mears' accounts and subpoena 3 city officials connected to the scheme. But something told me Mears would not go quietly. I was right. That same night, my car was broken into. Nothing stolen. Just a torn-up photo of my mother taped to the dashboard, an old picture I had not seen in over 20 years. They were digging into my past. And now, they wanted me scared. But fear does not work on people who've already died and come back. And I died a little every time I stood over a fallen soldier, every time I folded another flag for a family, every time I watched America call me a hero while still crossing the street when I walked by out of uniform. I called a press conference the next morning. No podium. No microphone. Just me. In uniform. Standing outside the South Carolina state capitol, holding the framed photo of my mother. "This woman," I said. Voice steady, raised me to believe that service was sacred. That when the system breaks, we fix it, we do not run, we do not bow, we do not hide. I looked into the cameras. They have come after my name. My record. My family. What they do not understand is this uniform is not just mine. It belongs to every girl who was told she could not, every boy who grew up afraid of sirens, every parent who buried a child without justice. Pause. Breath. They think I am alone, but look around. Behind me, one by one, soldiers began to arrive, off-duty black service members. Veterans, nurses, EMTs. Firefighters, some in full dress, some in fatigues, some in tears. They did not need to say a word. Their presence was enough. And suddenly, I was not just a woman with a badge. I was the face of a reckoning. Meanwhile, Mears made his move. He filed a countersuit against the federal task force, claiming unlawful surveillance and character defamation. He called me a rogue officer with an agenda. The media frenzy split in two. Some called me a whistleblower. Others, an anarchist. But while they bickered, we delivered. At 3:27 p.m. that Friday, Agent Ross served Mears at a charity gala, right in front of his donors. The footage went viral. The shocked face of a man who thought his position was a shield, not a target. He was led away in cuffs, not in silence, but in shame. I watched the clip once. Then I deleted it, because this story was never about him. It was about the people whose names he buried, the victims no one interviewed, the parents who stopped believing in accountability. And for the first time, they were being heard. The Dodge released a public statement validating the investigation. I was reinstated not as a temporary liaison, but as Chief Officer of Civil Oversight and Accountability for the Southern Region. The badge they tried to strip from me. Now it bore my name in gold. But even then, I knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of something harder. Because burning a crook tree is one thing. Replanting justice is another. They say change starts with a voice, but real change, the kind that scares systems, starts with refusal. Refusal to be quiet. Refusal to compromise. Refusal to go away. And I had refused. Now, I sat at the head of a long mahogany table in the South Regional Office of Civil Oversight. The same officers who once laughed at me now avoided my eyes in mandatory debriefings. The same politicians who dismissed me now stood behind podiums, mouthing apologies they never meant. But I was not here for their comfort. I was here for their accountability. One by one, I built something they did not expect. An actual system that worked. I created an independent civilian review, board majority black, brown, and working class people who had lived the trauma, not just studied it. I restructured officer evaluation metrics. No more reward for arrest quotas, only de-escalation, resolution, and community feedback. We instituted bodycam audits by a third party. We made every complaint trackable, public, time-stamped, and impossible to delete. We installed QR codes in every precinct lobby. Scan it. Rate your interaction. Tell the truth anonymously. And the truth came fast. Thousands of civilians, once too scared to speak, flooded our database with stories. Some were simple, some horrifying. All of them mattered. For the first time in decades, people felt like the law was listening. But power does not crumble without a fight. 3 weeks into my tenure, I received an encrypted file. No name. No message. Just a video. I opened it. It was Morel's, my second in command. The man who stood beside me on the precinct steps. The one who said, "We have been waiting for someone like you." The video showed him in a dark room laughing with Perry. Drinking. Handing over looked like a thumb drive. He was feeding them information. Worse, the timestamp placed it during the investigation, while I trusted him. While he pretended to care, I stared at the screen for a long time. Long enough to remember my first night in Kabul. How the enemy was not always the one across the line sometimes. It was beside you in uniform. I summoned Morales to my office. He arrived 10 minutes later, calm, confident. I held up the tablet, pressed play, said nothing. His face did not change. "You do not understand." He said, "It was just politics. Everyone was playing both sides. I was just protecting my career." I stood slowly. "You were not protecting your career. You were sabotaging justice." He shrugged. "And yet here we are. You win. Mears is gone. Perry's gone. Why dig further?" I stepped close. "Because if we let rats run the kitchen, it does not matter how good the recipe is. The food will still make people sick." He smirked. "So what now? You fire me?" "No." I said, "I am indicting you." His eyes finally flinched. "You think you are untouchable now? Ha! No." I said, "I am held to a higher standard now. And so are you." 2 agents entered. Morales was escorted out. No cuffs. No scene. Just consequence. And then, for the first time in days, I was alone. I sat at my desk, closed my eyes, let the weight settle. Because doing the right thing, especially to someone you once trusted, is harder than taking down a villain. It is personal. It cuts deeper. But I did not come this far to stop when it hurt. That night, I attended a candlelight vigil for Marcus Tilden, the boy from the bodycam video, the one Perry slapped. He stood beside me, now taller, voice stronger, no longer afraid. He lit a candle for every name we would uncovered, then handed me one. "For you," he said, "for the fight you did not run from." I held the candle high and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds gathered in the square. Soldiers, nurses, survivors, children, parents, strangers who had made this fight their own. I realized then, I had never truly been alone. They tried to arrest me, tried to smear me, tried to buy silence with fear. But in the end, they gave me something they could not take back. Purpose. Because I was not just a black woman in uniform anymore. I was a symbol, not of perfection, but of persistence. and as the flames flickered across faces lit with hope, I whispered into the night, "You tried to bury me, but I was a seed." And now we rise. The vigil ended with quiet, not the heavy, suffocating silence I knew from before, not the silence of a community too afraid to speak, but the kind that follows a battle well fought, the kind of silence that carries respect, power, and grief that refuses to harden. I stayed long after the candles burned low, after the crowds dispersed and the camera crews packed up. I stood beneath the statue at the square, the old bronze soldier they erected decades ago, meant to honor defenders of the state. And I thought, what happens when the ones who defended it are the ones it turned against? Because that is what they did to me. That is what they do to many of us, not just with batons and cuffs, but with headlines, silence, and strategic ignorance. I survived Afghanistan, Iraq, flood zones, and friendly fire. But this war was quiet, domestic, hidden in policies and precincts and polite speeches. It was morning when I returned to the office. Danielle, the cybersecurity analyst, was waiting at my door, her face pale, her hand trembling with a fresh report. "We found something buried in Muriel's S-files," she said. "Something worse." She handed me a folder. Inside, internal memos between Muriel's and a man named Joseph Kittredge, a private security contractor. Former Blackwater, quietly hired to consult with several local law enforcement agencies during the summer protests 2 years ago. Kittredge had been given access to precinct data. He created predictive policing models, algorithms that profiled neighborhoods by race, income, and social media sentiment. They labeled entire zip codes as pre-hostile, targeting black communities with drone surveillance and plainclothes infiltration. He was not just consulting. He was watching, logging, feeding fear into the system to justify militarization. He was the architect of suspicion, and Muriel's had helped him. That day, I realized something bone deep. This was not just a crooked precinct. It was a network. Law enforcement, private security, city officials, all tied together by a desire to maintain power through fear. And I had just rattled their tower. But Kittredge was not in hiding. He was speaking at a leadership in law enforcement summit in Charleston, headlining a panel about restoring order in turbulent communities. The hypocrisy made me sick. I did not ask permission. I showed up in uniform, with cameras. When I walked into that ballroom, the air changed. Kittredge looked up mid-speech. His lips twitched into a smile he probably reserved for courtrooms thin. Arrogant, untouchable. "Sergeant James," he said into the mic, "to what do we owe the honor?" I stepped up onto the stage. "To the truth," I said, "and to the people you targeted like statistics." Gasps, murmurs. Cell phones raised. "I have proof." I continued. "You funneled taxpayer data into a system that criminalized blackness. You created maps of where to send riot gear, not where to send counselors. You made fear a business." He laughed too loud. "You have no authority here." I pulled out a court order from my uniform pocket. "Actually, I do. Signed at 7:14 a.m. this morning by the South Carolina Superior Court. You are being placed under investigation by federal civil rights prosecutors. Camera flashes. Audible gasps. Half the room stood up. The rest froze. Kittredge's jaw clenched. "This is political." "No," I said. "This is overdue." That moment, it went viral. But more than that, it started a movement. Within hours, 3 more private contractors were named in related lawsuits. Cities across the region began freezing surveillance contracts, and communities started asking harder questions. Who is watching us? Why? And who profits? That night, I stood alone on my balcony, the city lights below blinking like a code I did not yet understand. I thought about my mother, how she used to whisper before bed, "One day, they will see you." She did not mean fame. She meant recognition, dignity, truth. And now, standing in the uniform they tried to strip from me, I whispered back, "They do, Mama, they finally do." But I was not finished, because this story, my story, was never meant to be about just me. It was about every soldier told to serve, a country that forgets their name when they take off the uniform. Every civilian silenced because they asked for justice instead of begging for forgiveness. Every woman who did not sit down when the room got uncomfortable. I was just the match. They were the fire, and the fire was still spreading. The hall was colder than I expected. Not physically, no. The temperature was perfect. The air crisp from polished vents humming quietly behind oak-paneled walls. But the chill, it came from the eyes watching me, rows of them. Suits, ties, flags, faces more concerned with optics than outcomes. The United States House Committee on Justice and Accountability. They called it a hearing, but I knew what this was. A test. A show. A room full of men and women who thought they would get a scared soldier with a sob story. Someone easy to fold into their agendas. Clean it up. Package it. Move on. But I was not here to decorate their theater. I was here to burn it down and build something better. I adjusted my uniform, ran a hand across the ribbons on my chest, took a breath. Then the chairwoman, Representative Clarissa Brandt, 60s. White, steel-gray hair, sharp voice spoke into the microphone. "Sergeant Helena James, you may proceed." I stood. "I am not here because I wanted to be," I said plainly. "I am here because I was thrown on the ground, handcuffed in uniform, and humiliated in front of the nation for doing what you all say you want from soldiers, protecting the innocent." I paused. "But more than that, I am here because I did not die in silence like so many others." A ripple moved through the room. I scanned their faces, then leaned in. What happened to me is not rare. What is rare is that it was recorded. That silenced them. I recounted the arrest. The way Officer Perry's knee had pressed into my spine. The way Officer Jenna had sneered at my uniform, laughed at my rank. The way I was treated not as a veteran, not even as a woman, but as a threat, simply because of my skin. Then I told them what I found. The algorithmic profiling, the erased complaints, the surveillance contracts and quotas masked as performance. How many more? I asked. How many more names are buried under policy and procedure? How many more children were taught to fear sirens instead of trusting them? Some leaned back. Others scribbled notes they would never read again. but a few looked like they were finally listening. Then came the question I knew was coming. Representative Carlton Vane. Texas white. Late 50s. Slick hair and slicker smile leaned into his mic. Sergeant James. He began. Your story is compelling. Truly. But surely you must understand there are officers who put their lives on the line every day. Isn't he painting the system with such a broad brush a disservice to them? I did not flinch. I leaned in closer. Sir, I am one of those officers. I have bled for this country. I have buried teammates. I have sat in rooms writing letters to mothers whose children never came back from the war I survived. I straightened. But here's what I know. If a system punishes truth-tellers and protects abusers, it does not matter how many good people are inside it. Because silence enables violence. Dead quiet. Even Brandt looked rattled. But I was not finished. I am not here asking for praise. I am not here asking for money. I am asking for policy. I am asking for a national independent review board with civilian oversight. I am asking for the end of predictive policing tools that profile poverty as criminality. I am asking for whistleblower protections that actually protect. I am asking for dignity, not just for me, but for every name you forgot the minute the cameras turned off. I stopped, breathed. Then I spoke one last time. Justice is not a moment. It is a muscle. If you do not use it, it atrophies. And I came here today because mine is stronger than ever. That ended the hearing. But the real moment, it happened as I walked out. A woman caught my elbow in the hallway. Young, black, wide eyes brimming. You do not know me. She whispered, but I am the sister of Devon Clark. 17. Tasered while cuffed. No justice. No apology. My heart froze. I remembered Devon's file. I remembered how it was buried under non-lethal incident. No action taken. She reached into her bag and handed me a folded photo. It was Devon. Smiling, a football in hand, life ahead of him. You spoke for him. She said. You gave him back his name. I took the photo gently, and that was when I cried, not from grief, from purpose, because no medal, no badge, no microphone had ever made me feel more useful than I did in that hallway holding a stranger's sorrow and knowing it mattered. Back in South Carolina, the work continued. We released a public database of misconduct. We funded trauma therapy for victims of police abuse. We launched youth mentorship programs, pairing veterans with at-risk teens. And the precinct where I was once arrested, it became the pilot site for the first community justice center, half police, half civilian. No barriers. Fully transparent. The mural on the front wall, a soldier in uniform, her face solemn, her fist raised, her eyes unafraid. Underneath, a single phrase, "We protect us." The day I retired from the Army, I did not cry. Not when I folded my final set of fatigues. Not when the commanding officer read my citations aloud. 17 years of service. 2 deployments. 3 medals for valor. Not even when the band played taps in slow, aching brass as they handed me my shadow box. But I cried that night, in my kitchen, alone, staring at my bare reflection, no rank, no ribbons, no armor, because for the first time in years, I was not Helena James the Sergeant. I was just Helena. Black woman. Survivor. Witness. And I wondered, who was I without the uniform? I found out fast, because retirement did not mean silence. It meant evolution. The movement we started did not end with my badge. It grew. It pulsed. It passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, across precincts, campuses, courtrooms, neighborhoods. It took root in protests and policy meetings. It bled into the conscience of a country too long content with shadows. We called it the third oath. First oath, to the country. Second oath, to the Constitution. But the third, to the people. To protect those the system forgot. To answer the calls no one else hears. To serve not just by law, but by love. I became its first civilian director. No salary, no retirement package, just a promise. We opened chapters in 10 cities within a year, each run by women. Survivors. Veterans. Clergy. Teachers. Mothers who lost sons. Sons who lost fathers. Teenagers who refused to go quietly. And on the anniversary of my arrest, I returned to the parking lot where it all began. It had changed. No longer cracked asphalt and flickering streetlights. Now it was Freedom Plaza, a community gathering space with benches, solar lights, and a black granite monument inscribed with hundreds of names. People wrongfully arrested, abused, profiled. At the base, a single bronze plaque read, "In honor of Sergeant Helena James, she didn't back down." I stood there that morning as the sun rose. Marcus Tilden stood beside me, taller now, with a scholarship to Morehouse and a documentary about his life in post-production. Daniel was there too, working on new encryption tools to protect whistleblowers. Agent Nguyen, now retired, taught civil liberties at a local college. Even Jenna, she showed up, not as an officer, but as a woman trying to learn. She stood at the edge of the crowd. No cameras, no speech, just stillness. I nodded to her. She nodded back. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but maybe understanding, because growth begins where defense ends. And this fight was not just about punishment. It was about planting something new. Later that day, I visited my mother's grave, brought sunflowers. Her favorite sat beside the stone etched with her name. "You said they would see me one day." I whispered, "Well, they see more than that now." I placed a single dog tag on the stone. Not mine. Devon Clark's. His sister had given it to me, engraved after his name was cleared. He was never a criminal. He was a child. And now, his record had been wiped clean. The wind was gentle that afternoon. As I stood to leave, I looked one last time at the horizon. I did not know what battles would come next. What headlines? What heartbreak? But I knew this. They could take my title. They could smear my name. They could rewrite the reports, delay the hearings, even bury the truth for a time. But they could never stop the reckoning that had begun. Because the people had seen, had risen, had spoken. And once the people speak, the real ones, the quiet ones, the hurt ones, you do not get to silence them again. Ever. And as for me, I may not wear the uniform anymore, but I will always wear the mission. They arrested me in a parking lot. They shoved my face into concrete, ignored my uniform, laughed at my rank, and believed that because I was black and female, I could not possibly be someone with power. But they were wrong. That arrest did not end my story, it launched a movement. I did not stay silent. I stood up, spoke out, and turned that badge of humiliation into a badge of honor. From exposing corruption in one precinct, to testifying before Congress, to rebuilding the very system that tried to break me, I learned something no battlefield could ever teach me. Sometimes, the greatest act of patriotism is not obedience, it is accountability. Justice does not come easy. It does not arrive with applause or medals. It takes grit. It takes pain. It takes the courage to be the first voice in a silent room. And the truth is, you do not need a uniform to serve. You just need to refuse to look away. So if you ever find yourself asking, "What can I do?" here's the answer. Speak. Stand. Support those who refuse to sit down. Because the moment we believe we are powerless is the moment power wins. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-world justice dramas. Comment your favorite moment or quote. Share this video, let the world know truth still matters. Together, we rise. Together, we change everything.